I tend to build my images from my own sources. I have done sort of appropriation related things in the past, but I've always felt that it's stronger where all the works are your own sort of pieces within the work you're creating. So for this show that's coming up, it's the artwork itself is a selection of different images which all look like they come from different sources, and they do. Sometimes my sources are from sort of fashion related works that I've done, or fashion related images as well, just shot by myself, or and it's quite interesting how that can tie in with the fine art realm, because that doesn't tend to be considered in the same area that other forms of photography are, like documentary or sort of landscape things. But actually they have become merged together recently with the sort of like the works of Vivian Sasson and Christopher Williams have very strongly shown how all these elements merge together, commercial and fine art, how they don't really have a boundary anymore, considering that our world is quite commercial in all its different senses, even especially in the art world too. So there isn't really that definition between what's commercial and what's not. So the same can come across in the images, and I think there's a real difference with people who have a sort of background or who tend to work sometimes within commercial imagery. The sorts of imagery they make, the way it looks, is quite obvious at times when you have that experience to see. You can see where that imagery is different from the works of people who work predominantly or only in the fine art area. I think with fine art you find there's a lot of different layers, a lot of different sort of textures, and everything is quite sort of it's got a real sort of feel to it. But I think with commercial imagery you tend to see quite a bit of flatness in it, or quite a lot of it's quite clear in the sense that there tends to be an obvious sort of cleanliness, because it's always trying to sell something, so it's always trying to make a very clear, distinct point. So you don't want too much cloudiness, you don't want too much muddy sort of things clogging up the imagery, you want it to be quite direct. And in fashion imagery you see a lot of that. So I think there are some of my works that show that part of it. Probably I think this one, for example, that's quite an obvious one that can transcend between the two, between fashion and fine art, very easily. And if you've seen the works of, say, Christopher Williams, there's the same thing. You look at some of his photographs and you sort of question what that is. Is it fine art? Is it an advert? But does it matter? Does it make a difference that it's fine art or an advert? When I look at it, for example, I always see the art element first, because you see something that's questioning, you see something that questions the notion of what it even is itself, and that straight away puts it in the art category. But in reality, perhaps the actual image itself was shot for a campaign or to advertise a brand. The same for the works of Roe Ettridge, who does a lot of commissions for fashion magazines actually, and he works with magazines like Days recently and things like that. But I've only known his work previously in a sort of fine art context. I've only seen it in that element. So it's interesting to see that crossover between people working in fine art and then working with brands or working with magazines, and it's become quite a common thing in recent years actually. But it's interesting to question what all of that involves, and where there's the barriers and the lines between all that, where the crossover can begin. Sometimes it's interesting with art, you can take the work a lot further than you can with commercial areas, because with art you can really extend the boundaries of what your work's saying and the way you present it. So hence, in an exhibition space, it's always more interesting to extend the actual work itself, so bring it outside of what it's supposed to be and give it a new dimension. And I've always been interested in giving works a new dimension. Before I used to draw on top of photographs or create layers into photographic imagery in any way I could. So part of doing collage or mixed media related things was to do with creating the layers to bring that work beyond what it was. So it's not a flat 2D image, it's something with depth to it and with further sort of dimension. So drawing on top of photographs, for me at that stage, added quite a bit of dimension. And now creating objects out of photographs is the same sort of dimension adding thing. And for me, that's part of using that is creating sort of different ways of showcasing the works and adding dimension in the materials that are used to make it, and exploring how then that can be presented in an exhibition context, to give it a further dimension of layers and sort of depth to it. What else can I say?